It feels like I'm repeating myself in saying that despite the overall state of Destiny 2 definitely not being the best right now and will remain so for the next few months, it's strangely ironic because the game's sandbox has genuinely never been more excellent, even better than the last time with the Edge of Fate edition of this series. So even though things aren't as hot as we'd like, if you're currently enjoying Destiny 2 and are just hopping on intermittently, today I still wanted to provide you with a guide on what the absolute best build in the game is for any given situation, for every single class, Warlock, Titan, and Hunter, Renegades edition, because there's nothing wrong with doing everything as efficiently as possible. Furthermore, because there are so many good and viable builds for all classes to choose from, even Hunters, today I'm going to focus on one main build as well as two honorable mentions for each section of the video to give you a wide array of options. And don't worry, there will be dim links for all of these builds down in the description box below. So without further ado, let's begin with Warlocks. But quickly before that, a word from today's video sponsor. Girls Frontline 2 Exilium is the official sequel to the mobile game Girls Frontline. It is a free 3D strategy RPG available for both mobile devices and PC. The latest major update, Corposant Part 2, is now online, featuring Voymastina, the strongest second-generation T-doll in the game. Corposant is GFL2's 42-day major event, which includes big story updates, giveaways, newcomer gifts, over 55 pulls, new players also receive 120 pulls, and 11,000 collapsed pieces. There's also a free skin voucher released at the end of January, valid until the end of the year. This voucher can be used to exchange for hundreds of skins. GFL2's core gameplay focuses on deep turn-based tactics while incorporating collection and RPG elements. GFL2 features a non-photorealistic rendering art style based on physically based rendering, which provides crisp graphics. Speaking of which, the remarkable art style allows for some really sharp 3D modeling in the refitting room. In the dormitory, it allows you to observe the dolls you've collected as well as interact with them. There are also a plethora of weapon models that are meticulously crafted in full 3D and can be viewed from any angle and have gorgeous aesthetics. Download right now to have the opportunity to get the physical team carry doll Voymastina, GFL2's newest and strongest second-gen elite doll. She is the defense-ignoring carry for physical teams, and her exclusive weapon, the high-performance assault rifle 6P71, can be modified to provide massive firepower. She is the perfect doll for physical teams, which are so easy to build and bring online. The best part, new players can get this top-tier doll easily after joining the game, and when you do, why not get some sweet skins? Make a stylish entrance with Voymastina in a dapper suit on a limited time discount until April 1st. This smart skin enhances her image as the Tuxedo Terror, which also constitutes her final form. If a chic suit isn't your thing, how about donning a brand new limited outfit for Robella, an elite sentinel doll? Also on a limited time discount until April 1st, her outfit is an elegant ball gown that brings exquisite beauty to your battles. It's not too late to join, and for the next 6 months there'll be a steady stream of giveaways and much more content. You can play for free on mobile and PC right now by using the QR code shown on screen now or the link in the video description. So starting with Warlocks, the one build that I think is the absolute best in the game, me personally, maybe a little bit biased, is going to be the Arc Warlock buddy build, which we actually made a video on earlier in the Renegades expansion, closer to when it released. The whole premise of this build is that we get massively increased melee damage, potent healing, and damage resistance, and it's just a ton of fun to run. As you can see from the gameplay, we're throwing out turrets, we're placing rifts, we're getting arc souls all the time, ionic sentries, and also our super itself is charging incredibly quickly with everything that we've got going on, so let's break it down. So this build is going to focus around the Storm Dancer's Brace exotic chest piece for the Arc Warlock, and it has the main trait Ascending Amplitude, which states that Storm Trance hits and final blows increase the damage it deals. And this was actually buffed in Renegades so that the maximum damage now goes up to 200%, which is a 3x damage increase. Plus, it also says that it refunds super energy when it ends. This is a maximum 33%, and even though that's low, it's still pretty good. It helps us to get to our next super even faster. And finally, ability damage while amplified grants Bolt Charge. So this build is also going to be heavily focused around Bolt Charge. We're going to be using things from the artifact to help boost that as well as our subclass makeup. So bottom line, Storm Dancer's Brace is here to increase the damage of our super by a lot and also allow us to get it back faster. So taking a look at the subclass now, we are using Storm Trance because this goes together with Storm Dancer's Brace. Healing Rift I'm going for because the one weakness of Arc Warlock is going to be your healing, but we do have some help from the artifact, but we do have to have Healing Rift just to make sure that we are, not being caught out in dangerous situations. I prefer the Ball Lightning melee ability over Chain Lightning just because when you are amplified, it releases additional Seekers. Even though it doesn't jolt, it still does a decent amount of damage. I just personally prefer this. Also going for the Pulse Grenade here because I think it is the best Arc Grenade, if not Storm Grenade if you wanted to go with that. Then for the aspects, we are going with Ionic Sentry and Arc Soul. We are essentially going with both of the buddies. And now I think that Electrostatic Mind is massively overrated for Arc Warlock and should only really be used if you are thinking of maybe doing a grenade build instead. Because what we're doing here is we are trying to maximize the uptime of both of our buddies. The first being Arc Soul, which is via our Rift cooldown, which comes back relatively quickly anyway. And then Ionic Sentry, which we can easily get with Arc ability kills or kinetic weapon kills. So you actually don't need the Ionic traces from Electrostatic Mind. And also it makes you amplified when you collect an Ionic trace, but with the amount of kills that we're going to be getting with our buddies and so on, we are never not going to be amplified with this build. Of course, Ionic Sentry is going to make it so when you get kills with kinetic or arc weapons or arc abilities, you will charge up this sentry, which you can then place on the ground, which is going to deal AoE blind when it lands, and it's going to be able to jolt targets when we have our fragments selected. Arc Soul, everybody knows, very good. Place your Rift, it creates an Arc Soul, which you can then supercharge if you become amplified. Plus, you can also give it to your teammates as well while being on pure Arc Warlock. As I mentioned, speaking of fragments, the first one we're going to want is Spark of Shock, because this is going to make it so both our Arc Soul and Ionic Sentry apply Jolt, which is going to be insane for AoE ad clear. As you can see by the footage, basically everything is getting electrocuted and we are just dispatching enemies very easily with this setup. For the second fragment, we are taking Spark of Resistance, which is going to help with survivability, giving us a 25% damage resistance when we are near enemies. Then Spark of Ions, which will make it so defeating a jolted target or defeating a target with bolt charge creates an Ionic Trace. That Ionic Trace is solely there to get our class ability back, aka our Arc Soul back faster. But with the right stat distribution, which we will talk about in just a second, we will be able to get our Arc Soul back or our Rift back very quickly anyway. Then finally, we have Spark of Frequency to make it so when we are amplified, we gain double the amount of bolt charge from all sources, and we are going to be getting bolt charge a lot from our weapons as well as Ionic Sentry, because every hit that we get with Ionic Sentry will add bolt charge to our stat count. So for the stats, with this build you are going to want 100 class, because that is the maximum recharge rate for our Rift, aka our Arc Soul. I have 80 here, but I also have a class font on my class item which adds plus 20, so whenever we're holding armor charge, I effectively have 100 class. After that, you are going to want to cap your super at 150 or 160 if you have better armor than I do, because if you run 2 or 3 super fonts on your helmet, this is going to add 40 or 50 extra points in super whenever we're holding armor charge. So because I have 2, we are going to be at effectively 190 super, which is going to be almost at that 45% super damage increase, which we get at 200 super. In fact, it'll be 40.5% at 190 super. So this build is all about getting our super back quickly and making it do a lot of damage, so it just makes sense to have a very high super stat. Then after that, we have 140 grenade, again, which I am boosting with grenade fonts on my gloves. This is going to increase the damage of our Ionic Sentries and our Arc Souls. After that, you can pour the rest into melee, and in terms of the pieces that I use to get this distribution, I have a helmet, which is Grenadier with a tertiary stat in class and a tuning in super. My gloves are Grenadier with a tertiary stat in class, tuning in grenade. My Storm Dancer's brace is Paragon with a tertiary stat in class. My boots are Grenadier with a tertiary stat in melee with melee tuning. And then my bond is Grenadier with a tertiary stat in class with weapons tuning. Could be better, so you could still get a bit more stats out of this. My armor isn't perfect, but it is good enough. Now with regards to weapons, we are of course going to be needing the Praxic Blade. This is here because it helps massively with survivability, and it's also just really fun to use, and it pairs really nicely with this build because you can just get in there, and if you're using the Impact Core, this makes it so that your hits grant bolt charge, and you are also going to be able to discharge the bolt charge that you get with the blade as well. So you're going to be dishing out bolt charge left, right, and center. I've also gone for the offensive form here, which is a 20% bonus damage increase to mini bosses and bosses. So whenever you come against a champion or a yellow bar or even just a strike boss, for example, it's just going to be dealing more damage, 20%. And the Hyperblade Catalyst is going to be an easy way to get amplified if you aren't already, and just close the gap between you and your enemies. After that, I've gone for a standard primary weapon. Doesn't really matter. I've just gone for the Reckless Oracle here, which, by the way, is going to be getting a perk refresh in the June 9th update. Could be really good in the future. Definitely look out for that. And then as far as your artifact is concerned, the only important mods are going to be the sword ones, which are Sword Storm Combo and Combination Argent Blade to increase the damage of our Praxic Blade. By far the most important, Dielectric. This one states that defeating arc debuff targets grants bolt charge, and given that we are jolting and blinding everything with our buddies, we're going to be getting a lot of bolt charge from that. And then rapidly defeating arc debuff targets spawns an orb of power and heals a small portion of health. So again, like I said earlier, the weakest part of Arc Warlock is the fact that it doesn't have a good amount of healing, so this is going to help massively with that. Finally, for our set bonus, I've simply gone for the 2-piece Ferropotent, because this one is going to make it so every time that you heal, you gain a stack of resist ×1, which is a 10% damage resistance for around 7 seconds. Again, because Warlock is a little bit squishy, we only have access to Amplified as our DR source. Having another 10% in the form of 2-piece Ferropotent is just very nice. In an effort to not make the video too long, because we do have other classes to cover, I'm just going to show you a brief snippet of the mods here. You can pause and take a screenshot if you'd like to, but like I said, the dim links are going to be in the description. So that is what I believe is the best and most fun Warlock build in the game currently, but I did say that we will have honorable mentions, and to be honest, yes, the prismatic buddy build is basically objectively better because you have the benefits of the buddies and Devour on top of that. I personally just think that the Arc Warlock setup is a lot more fun, but I do want to mention about the prismatic buddy setup because this is still just one of the most easy brain dead setups in the game that just does so much work for you. So quickly just glossing over it, we are of course going to want Feed the Void. We have Helion as well as our main buddy. I take this over Bleak Watcher because I think it is just a lot more fun. It allows you to move around a lot, plus Helion does a decent amount of damage. Can easily go for Bleak Watcher if you would like to, but me personally, I prefer Helion. Shout out to Toidy for putting me on Helion. We have the Song of Flame Super, of course the Arc Grenade, so that when we have Getaway Artist on, we consume the Arc Grenade and it gives us our Arc Soul. Then Fragments, I have Ruin for some weapon stat bonuses, Protection, Hope, and then Dominance. Dominance is so important because this is what allows our Arc Soul to apply Jolt, plus it also allows the Freezing Singularity Prismatic Grenade to apply Weaken with its Void component. Then for the weapons, I have the Praxic Blade again, the Sai Eterna Rocket Pulse, double special, and the reason I'm running double special is because I have a very high weapon stat. Now, one thing that you might not really realize is that the power of the buddies doesn't actually come from the damage they deal. It is simply the fact that you are able to apply Jolt using Facet of Dominance now. The Jolt is the main good thing about the new buddy changes that came in Ashen Iron, not the damage of them. My rationale is I would rather run double special, lightsaber and a rocket pulse with high weapon stat and just sacrifice any damage increase to my buddies via the grenade stat. So with my stats, I have instead gone for 170 weapons, which means that I get enhanced bricks very often so that I never run out of ammo with my rocket pulse and my lightsaber. 100 super, of course, to get our Song of Flame back or whatever super we're using faster. 70 class, 70 grenade, and 60 melee. I'm very happy with this distribution. I would probably prefer maybe 10 more points in weapons, but this is pretty good. I just really want to communicate to you guys that you don't need the 200 grenade damage increase for your buddies. That is more reserved for something like a Void Warlock build, which we'll talk about in just a moment. But for prismatic buddies, getaway artist stuff, just go for high weapons with double special. I made a short about this the other day. If you want to get better at Destiny 2, just run with high weapons and double special. I promise you, it will change the way you play this game. Set bonuses, again, have Ferropotent because it's just the best set bonus in the game. Then Ion Adapter, which means that when I get kills with my Rocket Pulse, I get even more damage resistance. Lastly, for our second honorable mention, I did want to talk about the Void Warlock chunk build because it still hasn't been fixed. Or as of the release of this video, by the way. So if you are wanting to just roll up to bosses, hold your grenade, and just delete everything about them, any ad in your vicinity, any boss, any raid boss, it still works. You can still just run up to them with Controverse Hold and your Chaos Accelerant aspect and just absolutely delete them. There are actually plenty of other good Void Warlock builds that also use Controverse or Nothing Manacles that aren't chunk related, but I still wanted to let you guys know that it still works. It hasn't been patched yet. It probably won't be patched until June 9th if I had to guess. And just a couple notes, if you're wanting to maximize your chunk, all you need is of course the Magnetic Grenade, the Chaos Accelerant. You also need Echo of Undermining. Despite the fact that Controverse Hold allows your grenades to weaken by default, you still need Echo of Undermining because for some reason it just makes your chunks better. Again, I'm going with the Praxic Blade. I have a Ferropotent set bonus. I also have the Sage Protector set bonus so that whenever I get sword hits, I get a little bit of grenade energy back, which is really nice for a chunk build. Not necessary, but it's just pretty good. Stats wise, 200 grenade, of course. We are just chunking. We want the max amount of damage for our grenade as possible. 100 super, and then the rest doesn't matter. I do find it quite funny how this is seriously a game-breaking build, yet it is still not been patched. So just use this until it is patched because it is just a bunch of fun at the end of the day. So that is going to do it for the Warlock section. And like I said, there are going to be dim links for all of these builds in the description, so don't worry about that. Okay, so now we are moving on to the Titan, and the build that I have selected as what I think is the best Titan build in the game in the Renegade sandbox is going to be the classic Bonk Solar Titan build. And as some of you may know, this build is all about massively increasing your melee damage and getting a ton of damage resistance and healing effects while doing so. It is a very fun build. It has been in the game for so long, but in the Renegade Renegade sandbox, I would argue that it is the best it has ever been because of the new stat system and the set bonuses that are available to us. So let's get into the breakdown. First of all, it all starts with our exotic of choice, which is going to be Worm God Caress. This one is going to make it so every time we get a melee kill, it will increase the damage of our melee, and in fact this stacks up to 5 times, and this will cap out at 400%. So when we have that 5 stacks of the buff, our melee is literally dealing 5 times more damage, which is really good. And then going into our subclass, we are pairing that with the Roaring Flames aspect, because this one is going to make it so final blows with solar abilities or ignitions increase the damage of your solar abilities, which stacks up to 3 times. Now for specifically solar melees, this will go up to 200%. So add those together, you have a very potent amount of stacking melee damage, which is just going to absolutely obliterate even the most high health targets. Some of the gameplay you are seeing in the background is of me soloing the cutthroat version of the Equilibrium dungeon, the first encounter, and as you can see, I am just absolutely melting through it with ease. And a big reason I am not dying, because solar subclasses are famous for not having damage resistance, they have good healing, but not good damage resistance, is because of our set bonuses, but we will get into that. First of all, let's quickly go over what I have in the rest of the subclass. Supers wise, you can do what you want. You could go with Hammer of Soul or Burning Maul. If you're wanting to use this in a boss scenario, you could go with Burning Maul, because then when it comes to super damage, you could swap to Pyrogale Gauntlet instead to give you that one slam with the super. And then for the rest of the abilities, I've got Rally Barricade, of course, the Throwing Hammer, Healing Grenade for when things get tight or if you just need a quick burst of healing, Roaring Flames, obviously to increase melee damage, then Soul Invictus. No need to go Consecration here, not really good on pure Solar Titan unless you're going for like a Kepri setup. Soul Invictus, every time you get a kill with a solar ability, including our hammer, we are going to create a sunspot on the floor, which is going to give us restoration and make it so when we are in super, the super drains more slowly. Now for the fragments, the first one we are taking is Ember of Torches to make it so powered melee attacks against combatants make you and nearby allies radiant for 10 seconds. Then we have Ember of Searing to make it so defeating scorched targets grants melee energy and creates a fire sprite. Ember of Solace to make radiant and restoration effects applied to you have an increased duration, and then Ember of Eruption to make solar ignitions have an increased area of effect. To be honest, the only reason I'm taking this is because of the plus 10 melee stat, which if you look at my melee stat, we have 200. So let's talk about that now. Because we are on a melee focused setup, this is basically the only build in the game that it makes sense to have high melee on, which in our case is going to be 200. When we are at 200 melee, our melee is going to be dealing 30% increased damage, which is a multiplicative scalar. So add that onto our Worm Gods, add that onto Roaring Flames, we are dealing so much melee damage. And also with regards to our other stats, nothing else matters. Super doesn't matter because our supers are relatively underwhelming. Most of our power comes from our melee ability. Class doesn't matter at all, neither does weapons, neither does grenade. Health, the only reason I have health at 100 is because a lot of the pieces I use are brawler, and brawlers have health as their secondary stat by default. So that is essentially unavoidable. And speaking of the pieces that I use to get to this distribution, my helmet is brawler with a tertiary stat in grenade with a health tuning. My Worm Gods are paragon with a tertiary stat in grenade. My chest piece is brawler with a tertiary stat in class. My boots are also brawler with a tertiary stat in super, and my class item is brawler with a tertiary stat in super as well. Weapons wise, I have gone for the Praxic Blade, and this also ties in nicely into how we are getting damage resistance on this build, because having the Praxic Blade gives us access to the Hyperblade Catalyst, which will make us amplified when we are blocking shots. And then for our set bonuses, which is going to be the other side of our damage resistance situation, I have gone for the 2-piece Smoke Jumper and the 2-piece Ferropotent. Ferropotent because of the 10% resist when we are healing, which we're going to get constantly from the cure and restoration from hammers and sunspots. Then the 2-piece Smoke Jumper will give us an average of 30% DR every time we collect an orb for around 3 seconds or so. And we are going to be making lots of orbs because we're running with triple heavy-handed on our gloves, so that with every melee kill we get, we create an orb of power, which is going to proc Smoke Jumper every time. I know that Smoke Jumper isn't obtainable very easily right now. The only way you can get it is via the Hawthorne engrams, so unfortunate if you never manage to get good pieces yourself, but to be honest, having just 2-piece Ferropotent is enough. This is the next level up if you can get both of them, but just having Ferropotent is fine. Don't worry about that if you're somebody who joined in Renegades. For the artifact, I've just gone for the sword damage boosting mods. There are no solar focus mods or other ones that benefit this build in particular in the current artifact, so just go for the sword increasing ones, doesn't matter for the rest. Finally, the mods for this build are on your screen now. I have got a couple ammo finders, kinetic siphon for the lightsaber, then triple heavy-handed so that every kill gives us the orbs. Pause if you need to, but like I said, dim links in the description. This build is seriously a ton of fun, and it is genuinely, I believe, the best iteration of the Solar Titan bonk build we have had to date, and that that is why I have selected it as the best Titan build in the game. But of course there are honorable mentions, so let's get into those now. The first honorable mention I have is Prismatic Titan. Now, despite Consecration being nerfed so many times over the years, it is still incredibly solid, and this time I've actually changed up what exotic to use with this build, and we are going with Curus of the Falling Star instead. We are very much in a not swap climate, or that's kind of the mindset that I have adapted when going with builds for my Prismatic Titan, because really nowadays your exotic doesn't make a huge difference when playing Consecration Prismatic Titan, which is what this build is. It is still the classic knockout, Consecration, passive protection, courage, ruin, balance with your choice of Darkness Grenade, Thunder Crash as well, because of the ignition nerfs and the nerfs that Consecration got in general over time. It doesn't really matter what exotic you choose for Prismatic Titan, because things like the class item with Inmost Syntho is still pretty good, but the ignition damage doesn't scale anymore with Synthesept, so it kind of gets rid of that. You could go Worm God like we did with the Solar build, but to be honest, it doesn't make a huge difference. So what I've gone for instead is Curus of the Falling Star, and this is very good if you're going into like a contest raid, for example, because you're going to want this for damage anyway, and my stats are also reflective of this mindset. I have 170 weapons running double special, I have a single rocket pulse and a rocket sidearm, gone for the Lotus Eater here, and then 150 super, and then I'll have some damage loadout which has triple super fonts, which will let me get up to 200, so that my Thunder Crash is doing the maximum amount of damage. But just in roam, 150 is good. Then I've got 70 grenade, 70 melee, and 30 class for cooldowns. From the gameplay you're seeing, even though I don't have any melee boosting exotics on and it's purely just Curus, Consecration is still very good. And when I do come across a healthy target like a boss, having Curus is really nice because it dispatches them almost guaranteed. This thing lets your Thunder Crash do so much damage, it's just the best to have in that situation. Set bonuses, again, we have Corposant here, and then Ion Adapter for the Rocket Pulse DR and the general healing DR. Like with most builds, this combo is just very hard to beat. So Prismatic Titan, still very good. Now for the last honorable mention, I do want to go for the Stronghold setup. Now my eyes have been open to the Stronghold setup because I've been using this a lot when playing Titan recently, and it is just so much fun, man. Plus it is also just really good. We are going to be on Strand Titan because of the Banner of War aspect, where getting a kill with a melee attack or a sword will raise the banner and increase the damage of our sword, which by the way is 20%. So for simply getting a kill with the Praxic Blade, we are increasing its damage by 20%, which is pretty nice, and it's going to heal us. We also have all of the other Strand effects like Into the Fray to give us Woven Mail when we break tangles, and then of course we have Praxic Blade, Stronghold, just the classic hold block and win build, but with the emphasis on being aggressive, because we made a video on this a few months ago. Stronghold, very good for blocking, yes, but it is just so much better if you're also offensive with the build rather than just defensive, and that comes in the form of our set bonus, which is going to be the full 4-piece Swordmaster. This one will make it so when we get a hit with a sword, it will exhaust enemies, which is a 25% reduction to their outgoing damage. That's the 2-piece. But then with the 4-piece, when we drop our guard, we are going to get around 4 seconds of resist times 4. It is just a very good way of maintaining a very high amount of DR, and if you just like swords and blocking and not dying, then this build is just going to be perfect for you. So that is 3 very strong Titan builds to choose from. I will leave it up to you to decide, but as always, all 3 dim links will be in the description, so don't worry about having to copy the video. Now we are finishing up with the Hunters, and actually the build that I believe is still the best in the game, at least me personally, for the Hunter is going to be the Arc Hunter Gifted Conviction build using Tempest Strike that allows you to improve the damage of it massively and use it over and over again. This is in fact the build that we stated was the best in the last video, and actually it has been improved a decent bit since then because of the addition of new set bonuses and artifact perks, so let's break it down. So the main premise of this build, if you didn't watch the last video, is massively increased AoE melee damage via Tempest Strike, and we are also going to have potent healing and damage resistance through everything else that we set up alongside it. And it all starts with our exotic of choice, that being Gifted Conviction. This one has the perk The Gift of Certainty, which reads, activating Ascension or Tempest Strike throws bouncing explosives at nearby targets that jolt and damage them. Jolting nearby targets grants you damage resistance, and this goes all the way up to resist times 4, which is a 50% damage resistance. Granted, you start at times 1 and you have to be near enough to enemies, but with this build you are going to be playing very aggressive anyway, so this chest piece is going to, number 1, give us a lot of access to jolt, number 2, improve the damage of our aspects, which in this case is going to be Tempest Strike, and number 3, give us damage resistance for simply just using them. So it's very good for Arc Hunter. Basically never take it off when I play this class. And then moving into the subclass, our super of choice is going to be Gathering Gathering Storm, though you could choose whatever one you like, whichever one you find most fun. For me, this is currently Gathering Storm because it is ranged and it is one-off, so I can just throw it at a boss and don't worry about it. Now, for the abilities that basically make the main gameplay loop of this build that get everything going, you're going to want Gambler's Dodge, because when using this near enemies or just anywhere in general, it will give us a good chunk of melee energy back. Combination Blow, then Flux Grenade. The grenade doesn't really matter, just choose whatever you want. Then Tempest Strike. And here is the main interaction that we are going to be doing. So as some of you may know, getting a melee kill with Combination Blow will give me a stack of Combination Blow on the left. Then dodging near an enemy will give me my melee back. I can use the melee again, which will then give me my dodge back, and you can repeat the loop over and over again. But ever since the Edge of Fate, this has been made to work with Tempest Strike as well. Instead of punching, I use my Tempest Strike. I am now going to get my dodge back. And then I can dodge near an enemy again, and then I can use my Tempest Strike again, and it'll give me my dodge back. So you can do it this way now, and at Combination Blow × 3, we are also going to be receiving the damage benefit towards our Tempest Strike as well. And at the maximum 3 stacks of Combination Blow, it is a 400% melee damage increase. Literally exactly the same as Wormgod Caress, but it's just an ability. So we're going to be having that on our Tempest Strike, dealing 5 times more damage, and we're going to be getting it back very frequently with Gambler's Dodge, because like I said, the interaction just works now. For our second aspect, we have Flow State. This one is going to make it so defeating a jolted target makes you amplified, and Tempest Strike does apply Jolt. And actually, before we move on, it does also have a secondary effect, which in the bottom, as you can see, it says defeating jolted targets grants a stack of Bolt Charge. Back to Flow State, it also has the secondary trait, while you are amplified, your dodge recharges more quickly. So if you ever get in a situation where you need a bit of dodge energy back because your melee whiffed or something like that, it just helps. And it also increases the reload speed of your weapons, which is just nicer for me. It makes my weapons feel nice. I love it when builds just make your weapons feel good to use, so I just like it over this. You could go for Ascension if you wanted, but I prefer playing on the ground because I just think it's a little awkward to use your Tempest Strike, then ascend near an enemy, wait to get back down on the ground, then use your Tempest Strike again. I prefer staying on the ground with using dodge to get my Tempest Strike back rather than Ascension, but that's just up to you. Ascension does also give you a 3rd fragment slot, so you'll have 5 in total, so it's kind of just pros and cons to both. Fragments wise, we have Spark of Resistance, give us that 25% damage resistance. Gone for Spark of Amplitude as well, to make it so rapidly defeating targets while you're amplified creates an orb of power. Then Spark of Ions, defeating jolted targets or a target with Bolt Charge creates Ionic Traces, which is going to help with getting our grenade back. Then Spark of Frequency, so that when we are amplified, every time we get Bolt Charge, we get a 2nd stack as well. Now, for your stats, because this is a melee build, kind of like the Solar Titan, high melee is what I would recommend. I've gone for 160 here. If you have better armor pieces, you could probably push this to like 180, 190, but again, this is just here to improve the damage of our Tempest Strike multiplicatively. Then after that, you want 100 super so that you get your super back the quickest. Then 70 class, because I believe you need a minimum of 70 class, or it could be lower, it could be 60 class to get your class ability back when getting a kill with either your melee or your Tempest Strike. Just go with 70 to be safe. So 100 super, 70 class, then the rest can go into grenade or health. It's up to you. But the important ones are high melee, high super, and at least 70 class. For the pieces that I use to get to this distribution, my helmet is Brawler with a tertiary stat in weapons, could be better. My gloves are Bulwark with a tertiary stat in melee, again, could be better. My Gifted Conviction is Paragon with a tertiary stat in grenade. My boots are Paragon with a tertiary stat in grenade as well. Then my class item is Paragon with a tertiary stat in weapons. A lot of this armor could be better, I could have better distributions, but this is just what I have currently on my hunter. I'm going to be farming some better armor. Set bonuses, Ferropotent 2-piece for the 10% DR when we heal, which is going to happen a lot with Combination Blow because, by the way, on top of giving you the melee damage, it also heals you. It basically does everything. Then the 2-piece Ion Adapter because I'm also using a Rocket Pulse to give me that Rocket Pulse splash damage resist whenever I get kills with it. And also I've gone for a standard primary weapon. I have Risk Runner here, but you could just use whatever you want. This is just kind of a placeholder, this filler. For the artifact, again, the most important mod this season for arc builds is going to be Dielectric because it'll make it so defeating arc debuff targets grants Bolt Charge, so it's even more Bolt Charge for our build. And for the secondary effects, where rapidly defeating arc debuff targets targets, spawns an orb of power, and heals a small portion of health. Arc Hunter, despite having better healing options than say something like an Arc Warlock via combination blow, it is still an Arc class and is relatively squishy compared to Prismatic or something like Stasis or Strand, so having more sources of healing is always better, so shout out to Dielectric for this very good mod for the build. So the mods are here, again, if you want to take a screenshot, but the dim link will be in the description box below. I still think that this build is one of the best in the game for the Hunter right now in the Renegade sandbox, but as I said, we do have some honorable mentions to go through. The first one is actually going to be Prismatic. It has to be said that Prismatic Hunter is still one of the most consistent and reliable subclasses in the game. It doesn't do a lot of damage per se, but the amount of kit that it has access to just allows it to be so consistent. Mainly Gunpowder Gamble and Ascension. And actually, since the last video, Gunpowder Gamble got a pretty significant buff, because now when you throw the Gunpowder Gamble and you detonate it in the air, it creates these solar seekers that have some really aggressive tracking that just track to enemies. And I believe it also does like 50% more damage. So we're going with Gunpowder Gamble and Ascension because Ascension is just one of the best aspects in the game. Gives you amplified, makes you get out of trouble, is a movement ability. So many good things about this. Gone for the grapple grenade. I also like the acrobat dodge on Prismatic Hunter, though you could very easily go for Gambler's dodge to get your threaded spike back. Gone for golden gun here as our super of choice. Then the fragments, you have protection, courage, purpose, ruin, and dawn. Stats wise, when playing Prismatic Hunter, I like to go for high weapons and run double special. My choice is Choir of 1 and a Rocket Pulse. With Choir of 1 and high weapon stat, basically every enhanced brick you get gives you so much ammo, or at least more than what you spent to get it in the case of Choir, so it's very good for that. Rocket Pulse is still incredibly dominant. Then the rest of the stats are just dedicated to having decent cooldowns. I have 55 melee, 80 grenade, 80 super, which I make up with a font on the helmet, 80 class as well for the Ascension, and 180 weapons as the main centerpiece. Set bonuses, Ion Adapter 2-piece for the DR Splash, then Ferropotent. If you're noticing a trend here, these two set bonuses are just incredibly powerful. The exotic is going to be Inmost Certarachne because still this hasn't been nerfed. You get 10 seconds of Woven Mail whenever you use any grenade of your choice, which is insane. You get that 45% DR, and the ability uptime you get from Inmost Light is just so good. As you can see from the gameplay in front of you, I am getting my abilities so frequently, I'm using them all over the place, and I have a ton of damage resistance at the same time. So Prismatic Hunter, definitely still one of the best Hunter builds in the game. Lastly, the second honorable mention that I wanted to show for Hunter is going to be the Void build, which we posted a few weeks ago, not for the neutral game portion, but just for the damage, because this thing is insane when used with Witherhoard and a crossbow and just quick swaps. As you can see from the gameplay in front of you, I'm able to get out all of my crossbow bolts incredibly quickly, and I'm dealing a ton of damage at the same time because of the changes to Mobius Quiver, as well as pairing that with Fortune's Favor so that I'm dealing 20% more damage when I have an overshield. It is insanely good for damage. If you are somebody who's raiding a lot, or you're just finishing off raid seals in this kind of dead time with your friends, then definitely try this out because it is a really good damage build. I will leave the dim link in the description, but definitely go check out the dedicated video because I explain things a lot better in that one, less so than what we have time for here today. So that is going to do it for what I believe are the best builds in the game for every single class Renegades edition. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you are still enjoying Destiny in these troubling times. I know I certainly am, but as we all know, things are quite slow, but I still wanted to provide you guys with some good content in the meantime. If you are somebody who is still, you know, hopping on every once in a while, and you just wanted to use some fun builds to pass the time and make it more entertaining. So I hope you enjoyed today's video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now, dear viewer.